I've been making a lot of sourdough baguettes lately, and I know how frustrating the shaping process can be for beginners. So I want to show you 4 different ways you can shape sourdough baguettes, and hopefully one of these methods will be helpful to you. I've got a batch of my sourdough baguette dough here that has doubled in size. I'll share the recipe with you in a video next week. Once your dough has bulk fermented, that's when you can divide and shape the dough. I'm dividing this dough into 4 equal pieces for these 4 baguettes. For this first technique, I'm showing you a no pre-shape method. Some popular bakers like Richard Burtonnet don't pre-shape their baguettes at all, so it's worth giving a try. First, flour one side of the counter and keep another area of the counter free of flour. Get one side of the dough floury and keep the other side sticky. Then flip it over onto the counter sticky side up and gently pull the dough into a square shape. This is the most difficult thing about the no pre-shape method because the individual piece of dough may be oddly shaped, but get it into a rough square shape the best you can. Then take the end of the dough that is farthest away from you and fold it over the center of the dough. Then grab part of the floured side of the dough again and roll it into the sticky side. You're creating tension across the dough, basically rolling the dough into itself. Keep rolling and pressing until you basically run out of the sticky part of the dough and you're just left with this seam on the bottom. Once you've formed the dough into a log, place it on the dry counter seam side down. This is when you're going to roll the log into a baguette shape. This part's going to take practice, more practice than I've done honestly, but just start rocking the dough back and forth a few times, firmly enough to make the dough start to elongate, but gently enough not to knock too much air out of the dough. As you feel the baguette reaching the correct length, apply a little bit more pressure with your hands to make the tapered end on each side of the baguette. Here's that one more time, a little bit slower. I'm just applying gentle pressure to the dough as I rock it back and forth until I feel it roughly getting to the correct size. Then I'm applying more pressure to taper off the ends. Transfer the dough seam side up onto a couche or seam side down onto a piece of parchment paper to proof. The next 3 methods each require a pre-shape step, so we're going to shape them each once now and then give them their final baguette shape later. This one I call the Oblong PreShape method. Have flour on one side of the dough and the sticky side facing up, then just gently fold each side of the dough into the center on top, creating a seam in the center like this, and then you've just got this oblong or oval shaped dough. You're going to let that rest for 15 minutes on the counter, and then you'll give it its final shape later. So the next 2 methods require a rounded pre-shape, so I'm just going to form each of these into a ball by cupping and pulling the dough like this with my hands, creating tension across the top of the dough until it's in a nice tight ball. This is similar to what I do for sourdough bread when I'm making a loaf, either a boule or a batard. I usually pre-shape it into a ball first. I'm going to let these rest for 15 minutes, and then I'll shape each one of them into a baguette. Shaping method number 2 is the oblong pre-shape method. We've got this oblong piece of dough, and quite honestly, it caused me a few challenges this time. The thing about this dough is that it's already so long in its length, and it's really relaxed after the 15-minute rest, so it was really easy for me to make this baguette too long. It was longer than my baking stone could handle. You'll see the result of that in a second, but right now I'm folding an edge of the dough over into the center, and then I'm going to keep grabbing an edge of the dough and folding it in the center again. This is kind of like a tension roll. I'm creating tension across the top of the dough, and then later I'm going to be able to roll that into a baguette. And as you can see already, this baguette is pretty much the size that it needs to be for my home oven and on my baking stone. So what I should have done is just tapered off the edges, but I kept rolling it and it got really, really long. Way too long to fit on my baking stone the correct way. So I ended up pivoting with this one and baking it sideways on the baking stone later. So just keep in mind if you're doing this shaping technique, it's easy to accidentally shape it too long. So be a little more gentle than you think you need to be. So for the third technique, these last 2 are my favorites. This is the balled pre-shape method. We pre-shape the dough into a ball, and now we're going to do the tension roll on the dough to form it into a baguette shape. So with flour on one side and the sticky side up, imagine there's a line going through the center and fold the side into that center. Then keep folding again into that middle line, keep going around, folding the dough into the sticky part of the dough until that sticky part basically disappears. Now we've got tension across the top of the dough and a seam meeting underneath. You can press that seam closed with your fingers like this, and then you're ready to roll this dough into the baguette shape. With firm but gentle pressure on top of the baguette, rock it back and forth with your hands a few times until you feel the dough reach your desired length. You don't want it to get longer than your baking stone. And this one, since it was pre-shaped into a ball, it wanted to hold its shape a little bit better. It was not hard to keep this the correct length. So once I rolled enough times, I pressed down with more pressure at the end and tapered the edges off a little bit. When I was happy enough with that, I moved it to the parchment paper. This last method of shaping baguettes, what I call the diamond method, is actually what I think is easiest for beginners. Take your dough that was previously pre-shaped into a ball, get flour on one side, and have the sticky side facing up. Pull the edges of the dough out on each side until you get a square like this. You want some prominent edges on the square. Rotate the square so that it's a diamond now in front of you, and then just roll the tip of the diamond towards yourself. Keep rolling and rolling and rolling. You don't really have to worry too much about tension. The dough is naturally going to form tension when you roll it this way. Here that is again a little bit slower. You're just rolling it into itself, starting with the tip of the diamond and rolling towards the tip that's closest to you. Now, the same as each other shaping technique, you need to rock this back and forth until the dough elongates, and then you taper off the edges by applying a little bit more pressure once you feel the dough is the correct length. With the two tapered edges like this, you can go ahead and transfer that onto your parchment paper or seam side up onto your couche. I'm going to let these baguettes proof for about 1 hour at room temperature on this parchment paper. Here I've got the first one, the no pre-shape technique. I've got the second one here, which is just way too long. That was a mistake, but it's still going to bake up and be good bread. In the middle, I've got the baguette that I used the balled pre-shape technique for, and then I've got the diamond shaping method on the far side. With these 4 baguettes, I'm going to score them and bake them in about an hour and see how they turn out. Crispy and crunchy and golden brown on the outside and soft on the inside, these baguettes were all really good, and hopefully you like one of these shaping techniques, and as you're learning to shape sourdough baguettes, hopefully one of these is helpful to you. I'm personally going to be using method number 4, the diamond shaping method, to shape the baguettes in my sourdough baguette recipe video that I'm going to be publishing next week on this channel. So stay tuned for that, and if it's already posted, it'll be right here.